22 long rifle versus 32 H&R Magnum and snub nose revolvers. And what I have today is some Remington ammunition. So I wanted to test the Remington Thunderbolt 22 long rifle because Thunderbolt and I go way back. I remember it being about 1995 and walking into a Walmart and picking up a box of this for like $8.97 and going home and shooting hundreds of rounds that day. A lot more expensive nowadays. But I've been curious for a long time how they're going to do out of a little snub nose revolver. And to compare that, I got some Remington 32 H&R Magnum Performance wheel gun. And that is a 95 grain semi wad cutter. It was actually listed as round nose when I purchased it online, but they came as semi wad cutters. And our Thunderbolt is just a 40 grain lead round nose. So I'm going to use my LCR revolvers today, both with 1.875 inch barrel. LCR 22 long rifle and our LCR in 327 Federal Magnum. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my ballistic gel test. So I'm going to do our real world simulation test first, which is 2 layers of t-shirt today, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard at the back to represent hitting back ribs. And you got to remember that's about a half representation of the density of flesh. So if we were to get like 16 inches in this setup here, that's more like 8 inches in a real living target. But also I want to test like an arm bone simulation, because a lot of people don't realize that an arm bone can get in the way. Your attacker can have their arms up, you know, aiming at you with a weapon. And what will these do going through an arm bone simulation into the ballistic gel test? So I'll do our regular real world simulation test, then I'll move on to doing an arm bone simulation test and see how these will do that way, and then I will shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we'll run our 22 long rifle over the chronograph. It is a 40 grain lead round nose. Let's see what kind of velocity we get out of this little short barrel here. .988, 905, 992, 909, 911. That's good velocity, but those are definitely grouping to the left for me. And you could say it's just me, but if it was just me, it would do it out of this one too. So we'll see if that happens. Now we have our 32 H&R Magnum. It's a 95 grain semi wad cutter. Let's see what we get with this. No read. It's not reading. Let me aim a little bit to the left, I guess. 829. No read. 829. All right, I'll take those numbers just because they're very consistent. I don't know why it wasn't picking up this particular round, but yeah, definitely that 22 long rifle was shooting to the left out of that revolver. Most ammo shoots a little bit left. That shot quite a bit left. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how 32 H&R Magnum compares to 22 long rifle. All right, first up we'll do our real world simulation, 2 layers of t-shirt, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. So ideally I want to get at least 12 inches of penetration, but I don't want the bullets to go through the back rib simulation. So let's see what we get here with our 22 long rifle Remington Thunderbolt. All right, let's hit that with our 95 grain semi wad cutter 32 H&R Magnum. Let's go take a look. Alright, so definitely a difference there. You know, and both of these have very low recoil. Obviously the 32 H&R Magnum has more recoil. 22 has almost none, but the 32 H&R Magnum is kind of like half the recoil of a 38 Special. So both of these are very, very low recoil. That's why I compare them, because I could see where somebody that might be kind of older would, you know, have the decision to make between 22 long rifle or 32 H&R Magnum revolver or 32 long or whatever. So I just want to bring that up. But with our 22, interesting here, we'll take a look at our rib simulation and see if anything happened, any type of yawing or whatever. Yeah, our 22 was yawing through, as were our 32 H&R Magnum. It just went straight. And again, I purchased round nose 32 H&R Magnum, but that's not what came. So I'm just going to do the test anyway. And obviously that flat nose is going to give you a little bit better penetration. So what we got with our 22, it's not that bad, to be perfectly honest. We're at about 9.5 inches of penetration. Going through rib simulation, all that, that's actually not that bad. And with the front on shot, that definitely would be enough penetration to hit something vital. It's just like the 12-inch number you see, it calculates in going through the side through an arm shot and all of that. The whole situation back in 1986, where that's what happened. The silver tip bullet didn't go through into the thoracic cavity very far, because it went through the assailant's arm first and stopped short of his heart. And you guys probably know the story, but the 12-inch minimum came from that, because that calculates in how far it is to hit something vital from a side shot, but a little bit different density there. But enough with that. That's a very long story. But with our 32 H&R Magnum, we got right there at about 16 to 16.25 inches. So we had very ideal penetration with our 32 H&R Magnum, and we actually did not go through too deep either. So that's really good performance overall. A little bit of yawing damage right here, but it straightened back out. That just causes more damage. So obviously our 32 did a little bit better. So let's put on our arm bone simulation here and see how these do going through that arm bone simulation first. All right, so we're going to do the real world simulation again, but in front of that we have 1.25 inch birch dowel to represent, like, if an attacker was aiming at you like this and it had to go, your bullet had to go through their arm this way. That kind of represents that. So I'm going to go through that birch dowel into the ballistics gel and see how these compare. So 22 long rifle. Let's see how this does. All right, and just so to be sure I get a fresh spot of this wood, I'll move it up a little bit so we're not going through any cracked parts of the wood there. 32 H&R Magnum semi-wad cutter. Let's go take a look. All right, so that definitely very much slowed everything down here quite a bit. We'll take a look here at our arm bone simulation. There's our 22 hit and our 32 hit. So definitely tearing through a little bit greater with that 32. And with the 22, that really slowed everything down a lot, because we pretty much are inadequate penetration. I mean, it is with both, but it's severely a lot less than what we want with the 22. So here's our impacts here. The other 22 yawed. It looks like our 32, I hit kind of close to the other channel, but it didn't actually hit it at all. And that one's kind of sort of yawned through a little bit more, but you know, it's definitely a bigger hole going on. First 3-inch piece, pretty good damage with both. But our 22, it barely cracked through, and we are at, I know Parallax will throw this off, but we are at 3 3/4 inches. And here come the jokes from half my subscribers when I say that. Just definitely a lot of under penetration there. Now with our 32, through our rib simulation, we got about 7 inches of penetration, and that's definitely low, but that's not terrible, because I still think that from a front on shot that would still equal out to be enough, because that would be like 3.5 inches into the thoracic cavity through ribs from a front shot. Now obviously through the side shot through an arm, it would barely break through the thoracic cavity and wouldn't go deep enough to hit anything vital, as where from a front on shot it would. So both of these are not great, but just judging from our regular test without the arm bone simulation, then our 32 H&R Magnum does a lot better than our 22. So yeah, I would say our 32 is a little better choice, but you know, you got a little bit more recoil. So let's pull these bullets out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at all of them. Then I'll shoot our steel target and see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. Alright, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through our real-world simulation, and you know, I bypassed measuring them because I really don't need to. Not really going to learn a whole lot. Looking at our 22 going through our real-world simulation, this whole bullet bent. So it's like coming out of a short barrel, and then it hits that first 3-inch piece there. It's already started to lose its momentum, so it wants to start to yaw. And that's one thing about the 22 long rifle when you're talking a 40 grain. It is really designed for a rifle barrel. Bullet weights more in the 22 short range are a little bit better for pistols in my experience. So when you have a 40 grain bullet, it's a little bit too long, moving at the velocity it's moving at, and it wants to, you know, hit the target and really start to yaw immediately, causing that bending going through, hitting the rib simulation. And the same type of thing is going to happen with something like this 32 H&R Magnum, but because it is a 95 grain bullet, it resists it a little bit better. And that's the whole point of momentum, you know, not to knock people over, but to resist, you know, hitting bones, to resist hitting flesh a little bit better, so that deforms the bullet less, and it can allow it to move forward a lot better without deflecting. That's the whole point of momentum and having a heavier bullet, and why a lot of times they do work a lot better. Now, going through our arm bone simulation, everything was amplified quite a bit. Our 22 doesn't have any of that coating left on it that's typical for on these Thunderbolts. You wouldn't even think that was a bullet probably if you found that on the ground. It's very interesting looking. So that deformed that quite a bit, going through that wood and then hitting the target. And our 32 H&R Magnum also deformed quite a bit, but again, that extra bullet weight with that momentum means that after going through that arm bone simulation, you know, we had plenty of bullet mass there to keep trucking along and do pretty well. It's just there would be a lot less velocity after going through that arm bone simulation. So interesting looking bullets overall. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target, so this is just my practical shootability drill. So I'm just going to get a sight picture, pop these off as fast as I think I can hit the target accurately, and see if there's a big difference here. So 22 long rifle, let's see how this does. All right, 32 H&R Magnum. All right. I'm pulling a little bit to the right with that, and pulling a little bit to the left with our 22. You know, recoil still isn't bad out of this. It's again, it's like a light 38 special. You know, if you could go one step below 38 special for recoil, that's where we're at with this. A little bit less than 9mm, a little bit less than 38 special. And the 22 has pretty much no recoil. So let me back it up real far and fire slow and see how these do from a little more distance. All right, 75 yards from the target. Yeah, I said a little bit further. That's a lot further. But I always have fun plinking at this distance. And I've fired more Thunderbolts in my life probably than any other round of ammunition. So theoretically, I should know them well. But how they'll shoot out of this, I don't know. 75 yards, 22 long rifle. Let's see what I can do with this. I'm not sure how many I hit. or where they're hitting, but I just automatically aimed to the right, off the target to the right, knowing that this seems like it shoots to the left, and that does seem like that allowed it to hit. And it does look like they are hitting low, so probably my misses were going low right. The 32 H&R Magnum. This particular revolver, being a center fire, definitely has a smoother trigger. Well, let's see how I can do with our 32 H&R Magnum. I don't know where those are going at all. Alright, so I didn't do so well with that either. Definitely hits the steel a lot harder. So looking at this, you know, interesting test overall. You know, I hear a lot of people say they want to use 22 for defense, or they want their grandmother or their mother or somebody to use 22 because of arthritis, all that stuff like that. And while I cannot comment necessarily on old people arthritis, I do have rheumatoid arthritis, and that's a little bit different than just arthritis. But for me personally, I handle the 32 H&R Magnum a lot easier, just because the trigger press on a rimfire is significantly greater than that on a center fire. So same revolvers here. These are both emptied out. I don't have a trigger gauge, but our 327 trigger, it's just super smooth and light. It's probably 6 or 7 pounds if I had to take a guess. The 22 long rifle, it's heavy stacks. It's probably almost double the amount of trigger press. So it is not easy to shoot. So when people say, well, a 22 revolver is the best option because of the low recoil, you have to also factor in, you know, you have to have a very strong finger to make that work. And my opinion is a revolver and 32 H&R Magnum, especially if you use 32 long ammo, you get some of the low recoil attributes of the 22 long rifle with just a little more recoil, but you have a much better trigger. In my opinion, that's a better compromise than just simply going down to 22, because when you look at the terminal ballistics of 22, it's rarely that good. So it's not that great, and then you also have this horrendous trigger pull, and all of that just to get, you know, a little bit less recoil. As we're with like a 32 H&R Magnum, whether you're using a light 32 H&R Magnum load or a 32 long load, you know, simply having the bullets being 80 grains plus is what allows them to penetrate well. You know, even at 800 feet per second velocity, they're going to penetrate well because of that mass, and you still have pretty low recoil. So honestly, I would suggest a 327, a 32 H&R Mag, or a 32 long, you know, revolver, any of those, shooting 32 H&R Magnum or 32 long rather than the 22. But it is good just to kind of see what various loads of 22 will do. So interesting test. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.